Kia ora, bula, kia orana, talofa, malawalele, and welcome to another week of Two Palangi and a PCDC pod. The show, the podcast that is for anybody interested in doing business across the Pacific, and we talk to some of the interesting people doing that business. So it's my pleasure to be here working with Dave to bring these great stories about Pacific business to life through this podcast.
And kia orana, bula vinaka, talofa ni, halo olgeta. I'm Dave Dewar, currently based in Rarotonga, Cook Islands, but previously based in Suva, Fiji. I've loved working for the past 5 years with businesses from Australia, New Zealand, and across the Pacific to help them understand the opportunities that exist in this part of the world. Glenn and I have been working together since 2020, and we're super excited to be telling some of these incredible Pacific business stories through this weekly podcast.
And in this episode, we're privileged to be joined by the wonderful Jenny Seeto. This was recorded earlier, and Dave, while the focus of the Talanoa was on Fiji tourism, given that Jenny recently chaired the Fiji Tourism Summit, I feel like we learned a whole lot more than just about tourism.
Yeah, well, those who are listening in, Glenn, will know, who do know Jenny, will know what an incredible career she has and what a phenomenal business leader she is, not just in Fiji, but across the Pacific. I first met Jenny when I came to Suva, and at that stage, I think she was the chair of the investment promotion agency, Investment Fiji. She's previously been the managing partner of PricewaterhouseCoopers in Fiji. And of course, I think we learned a fair bit from talking to her about her earlier career working in Denarau and some of the dark days of the receivership and some incredible stories that we'll let her tell a little bit later on. I think the other thing about Jenny is that to remember is that she's also her late husband, Dixon Seeto, was an incredible business leader as well. And Dixon is revered and remembered so fondly throughout Fiji for the role that he played in developing the Fijian tourism industry. And Jenny, actually, after the record, gave us some really wonderful, remembrances of the times that Dixon had kind of supported her career, but also supported the development of Fiji's tourism industry through Air Pacific, which became Fiji Airways, and then later in their both of their careers through the tourism industry. So, incredible lady, incredible couple, and it was such a privilege to have her on the show, wasn't it?
It was. So looking forward to hearing that interview again. But Dave, before we go into the Talanoa with Jenny, it was a short week here in Auckland with Auckland Anniversary Day last Monday. So I was out in the garden for the weekend, and then for the 4 days of the work week, I was trying to fit 5 days into 4, and so that was that was all good. But how was your week?
Well, we've had an incredible week here in Cook Islands. So the week began with some pretty challenging weather. I think there was a lot of concern over the weekend that it was going to turn into a mini cyclone, but fortunately it didn't. We just had what they call a tropical depression, but that means, of course, you get a heck of a lot of wind and rain. And that was particularly concerning for the Australian government here because they were hosting Australia Day on Monday. And I think now is probably a good time to wish all of our listeners from Australia a happy Australia Day this week. But I was obviously privileged and instructed to head along to the Australian High Commission's Australia Day function here in Rarotonga. And it was a fantastic event. I might have known the MC of the event reasonably well, and I thought he did a great job.
So that was you then, right?
Yes, it was me. Yeah, no, one of the great things about it was that there were some really incredible people that attended the event. It was fantastic to just talk to some of the business leaders from around Rarotonga.
Okay, Dave. Well, on that note, I think we head into the Talanoa with Jenny.
Well, Glenn, you'll recall that last week we were talking about the incredible growth that we've seen in tourism across the region, and we mentioned that Fiji itself was then in the midst of its annual tourism convention, which was taking place in Denarau. And we're really lucky to have on the show today the person who was the chair of that convention, a very good friend of both of ours. And I hope this is not the last time that we have her on the show, but very pleased to be welcoming Jenny Seeto. Jenny, welcome to the podcast. It's fantastic to have you on the show. I understand that this is your first podcast, and you're not a podcast listener yourself, but that your son is a fan and soon to be a fan of the show, I'm sure.
Yes, absolutely. I will definitely follow you, follow you both. I think it's a great idea, with this podcast of yours, given your experience in the Pacific.
We're certainly thrilled to be doing it. We're having a lot of fun talking to wonderful people like yourself and learning ourselves more and more about what's happening in Pacific business as well, along with our listeners.
And I think a key part of the value that the podcast has is having experienced business leaders like yourself, Jenny, come on the show to talk about some of the specific things that you've been working on. And so I wonder if you'd like to lead off by telling us, and really our audience and our listeners, a little bit about your own background or whakapapa, as we would call it in New Zealand.
Thank you, David. So most of my career was really spent in the professional accounting firm, Coopers & Lybrand then, and merged with PricewaterhouseCoopers. But I retired from PricewaterhouseCoopers as managing partner in December 2017. I became a partner at a very young age of 30, so a good part of my career was in partnership, and very lucky to have a great mentor in Adam Dixon. So I, was well into the business community at quite a young age, and it was great working with business people and big businesses, small businesses as well. So I spent most of my time working across different sectors, but particularly in the tourism industry, where I started off as a junior in terms of audit, but later I did a lot of audits, a lot of tax work and structuring work for the tourism industry, human resources as well. So I branched out and, practically covered the whole spectrum of advisory services. I mentioned structuring earlier, then there's valuations as well, and also was good to have the experience of working with experienced valuers and hoteliers in those days, like JLW, very earlier on in my career. So my clients included major hotels, niche and exclusive hotels such as Wakai and Vatulele, and I was involved with Laucala Island when they first started off in Fiji. Also other local hotels, and of course with a whole lot of supporting industries, as you would appreciate. Around tourism, we've got a whole bunch of little operators, some major as well, particularly in transport. So I worked quite a bit with them. But a highlight, I have to say, a highlight of my career was handling what was then the largest transaction in Fiji's history, which was the sale of the Denara properties. I don't know whether you're aware of it, but I was appointed a receiver and manager for a consortium of Japanese banks, when EIE International, when they went bust in the early 1990s. And I think there was about 13 odd hotels or companies then. And in those days, you only had Sheraton built, and there was Regent, which is now Westin, but they pulled down Regent, and now we have Westin. But in those days, we had the Sheraton and the Golf and Racquet Club. So I spent a year of my life at Denara. So 5 days a week, 6 days a week on Denara, managing the hotels and having creditors chase after me for payments.
So you weren't playing golf, Jenny? Yes,
No.
That's what you're telling us.
Oh, and that's the one regret. When I reflect throughout my career, I get so immersed with work. And you'd think everyone thought I'm playing golf at Denara, but I just didn't have the time. I'd wake up early in the morning. I'm in the office at 7:30. I have breakfast, and I don't finish till 10 o'clock. And I wished I had the time to play golf. I'll tell you, I think in that year, I probably played golf maybe 3 times when the Japanese came to visit. And I just went out with them. Yeah. So
But
that was a
seriously
great
though, Jenny, that must have been a heck of an interesting business time, like actually being in charge of that project. Must have been incredible.
Yes.
As you say, incredibly challenging, but gosh,
Yes.
to see what Denarau has become, you must feel very proud.
Exactly. Yes, no, very challenging. And I'm glad that, I was there able to do the work. Was very difficult for Dixon at the time, obviously spending time away in the family. Soon after that, I Gareth was born as well.
Yeah.
But I had good people take care, my in-laws take care of Gareth, so that was good. But the experience was incredible, like actually running hotels. Tourism in those days, actually, when we went into receivership, when we did the sale, our numbers were really low. We were actually in a dive mode then.
Mm.
But handling the sale process, getting, all the documents ready for due diligence and dealing with all the major operators. And of course, Sheraton was very keen to continue on as operator. But we had other competing hotel chains as well. So it was really interesting dealing with these large hotel chains in terms of negotiations. And I worked with fantastic lawyers, I have to say. I worked with Bob Smith, he's passed on now, at Lease, bless him, and lawyers out of Japan as well who were with the bank. But it was an incredible experience, and managed to get it through. And one of the things that came out of that, David, I don't know whether and Glenn, during your time in Fiji or having done some research, we had a land swap. That was, I think, we had the first swap on Denarau, where all the freehold and native lease was exchanged, and it was acre for acre, so no one really lost out. But really, at the end of the day, the landowners, in my view, they gained from this because all the hotels were actually put on native lease, and that is how, with the rents being generated as well from that, because you wouldn't have got the same level of rent had the residential houses been built on native lease. So having the hotels on native lease worked out really well.
That is a
must
really
be
interesting
very-
element to it, I think, Jenny, especially that connection with land. Because as I understand it as well, there's, am I right that there is a different formula used for lease payments when it's a tourism property, and there's kind of like a stake basically that the landowning community has in the success of the business, and it's kind of reflected in the lease payment
Yes.
formula.
Yes, that's correct. So, from what I understand, I haven't looked at it since I retired or in the last 3 years, but it is, for as far as I know, it's continued to be based on a formula. So in the early years, the formula was perhaps, 1 to 3% of gross revenue. And over the years, the E08 Land Trust Board has managed to negotiate the rate upwards. So there's significant amounts being distributed through that formula, because I believe now some of the rates have gone up to even 5% of revenue. So they have a stake in the business. And luckily, with the way tourism's going, we've earned a lot of money from that as well.
Yeah.
I think that that kind of is a really interesting point about the impact that tourism brings to GDP and kind of the wash that it has throughout the economy. It's not just a particular business coming in making a profit. So I guess, how important is tourism as a sector for Fiji's economy, but also for the business community across different sectors?
Yeah, extremely important. We've seen especially the impact from COVID and what happened with COVID. But when we look at the investments that Investment Fiji has in the pipeline, um, a lot of it is actually in the tourism sector, in hotels. The industry put out the word a few years ago. They wanted a few thousand rooms extra, and Investment Fiji has worked hard, and with Tourism Fiji, to get those rooms. And we've got new brands coming in. I think you've heard about One and Only coming in as well. High-end resorts in the Yasawas and other areas as well. What we must do, though, however, is ensure that these hotels do get built, because you're probably aware that we do have infrastructure issues in Fiji, trying to get water, electricity, and waste management issues that we have to deal with in Fiji. So and the other point that I do want to make, if I can just go back when I was talking about Denarau, is that at that time in the early 1990s, when I sold Denarau in receivership, there were no locals involved in large hotels. Now
Oh,
we
wow.
have F&B. right? So the money, actually, most of the money now stays in Fiji because the foreign investors are more, more hotel operators, and there's some foreign investors that own. But if you look at um, the acquisition by FNPF on the islands in Denarau, and at the time when I was when I was the receiver, I tried to get a group of local investors to buy the hotel properties. And I tried to get other partners in other firms involved to encourage their clients, because as receiver, I had to be very careful of conflicts, as I'm actually, was acting for the vendor. But in those days, no banks wanted to lend to locals because locals were not in the
really?
industry. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's such a shame because it went for a good price compared to what FNPF finally paid for Denarau. But as I said earlier, the banks didn't allow that to happen. But and FNPF was the first mortgagee, so there was just too much at the time. You had the unions. I remember saying that FNPF was going to lose its money because Denarau was in receivership. ANZ, I think ANZ was also. I think they both had pari passu mortgages. But at the end of the day, look, everyone got their money back, right? Except for the unsecured creditors. But FNPF did get its money back. And I often wonder, and FNPF was keen, I think, to buy, because I had discussions with FNPF, but coming now to current day Fiji. A lot of locals, as you can see, we've got, good local chains involved in hotels or in transport. You take the Rosie Group, Te Waka as well, and FNPF owning, a large chunk of the hotels in Fiji, done around this Momi Bay, and of course the Talanoa Group as well.
Yeah, exactly. And we've had on a previous episode Craig Strong from the BSP Life investment group as well, who was talking us through some of the investments that asset manager has. So you mentioned the one and only, of course, as well. I mean, it's remarkable to sort of think back on that period and that there could ever be any doubt about the investment potential of the Fiji tourism industry. It seems such a slam dunk these days. But I guess that kind of goes to my next question, which would be, if you could really bottle that secret sauce of the Fiji tourism industry, from a business perspective, what do you think would be the key ingredients that make it so successful nowadays, having really seen that evolution?
Yeah. If I had a bottle Fiji's secret sauce, I think there'd be a number of key ingredients, and the first would be the people. You look at you both had experience of Fiji people, the genuine warmth, I would say, hospitality, and a cultural instinct. It's quite instinctive, right, to welcome others into their homes or into Fiji. The big bulla smile.
The big bulla.
So that, yes, exactly. And that's something that you can't really manufacture. I mean, you travel the world and you hear people, say hello and welcome and greet you, but it's not with the same warmth that you actually experience in Fiji. And maybe I'm biased because I'm from Fiji, but it's something that, people try and learn it, but I don't think it's as successful because it has to come from the heart. And that is what I would say, our natural warmth and hospitality. That's the driving force behind our tourism brand. And I suppose that's where Tourism Fiji came up with the slogan, Fiji, where happiness comes naturally. So people and the environment would be the other one, the natural environment we have, the islands, the reefs, the landscapes, just, I would say, the cleanliness of our sea, the water, if you go for scuba diving or whatever water activity you might have. And I would say the third would be our resilience and our adaptability. We've, over the years, we've learned to evolve and adapt very quickly especially, COVID's taught us a big lesson. We came out of COVID quite well and early, and that was why we, made inroads very early in getting visitors back to our shores. So you have the luxury resorts, but you also have like the community tourism, and that's something that we're all focusing on here in Fiji, realizing, and there's more awareness now, I think, amongst the E08 community, and more the realization that we do have to involve the E08 itself into our tourism activities. They have the land, they're the people, they the ones, with all the naturalists around them. And so that was one of the things that came out of the convention, our tourism convention we had last week, involving community. But most of them are MSMEs, so the challenge is how do we scale them up? But I'll come back to about the secret sauce. So I think those three things: the human connection, our natural beauty, um, our business adaptability, and that makes us, I guess, keep competitive. Yeah.
Jenny, on
I could-
the first point you've made about people, I just wonder. I noted that Tourism Fiji has just launched their Be Fiji campaign
Yes.
to sort of under the sort of ethos of encouraging the rest of the world to be a little bit more Fiji.
Yes.
So I just wondered whether you had any comments on that.
I've just heard comments around it, but we heard what Dr. Pant, the new CEO of Tourism Fiji, he spoke to us at the convention, and we
Right.
can see some of the new ideas that's being brought to the table. Yes.
Great observations, Jenny. I think I couldn't agree more on the people. It's also quite interesting to see how many Fijians pop up in tourism industries and hospitality related industries, not just across the Pacific, but in Australia, New Zealand, and around the world. And, here in the Cook Islands, it's remarkable to see just how many Fijians smiling faces behind the counter of a resort or a hotel when you go into it here in Rarotonga. But I think the system is a big factor as well. Nationwide, if you think about that interrelationship between the government, you mentioned the Land Trust Board, the fact that there's kind of a land and a rent administration system. There's a national airline, there's Tourism Fiji, there's Investment Fiji dialed in as well. It's really interesting just to see all of those parts of the system kind of grouped around the success of that sector. And that, in my view, has been really, really valuable in seeing how effectively it can function.
Yes, exactly. Tourism is a sector that I would say connects with all the other sectors, right? We do rely on the other sectors as well.
Yeah,
I know that comes through strongly following out of the summit, actually. Jenny, just reading some of the sort of outcomes, there's a lot of talk about collaboration, connectivity, and partnership. So that was clearly a strong sort of theme through the summit.
Yes, yes. But I think it's important that we integrate and ensure that the Itoke community is part of tourism. That is, for me, really obvious. So the convention was, really about alignment, where, having the government industry partners in the same room and talk honestly about where the sector is heading. And then focusing, I suppose, the conversation from recovery, because we talk a lot about recovery, but to future readiness. So we were trying to put together all the information and ensure that we did have some inclusive decision making. I think from what I saw at the convention, and the Deputy Prime Minister was with us for 2 whole days, which shows his commitment. There's a lot of commitment to ensure that that the industry is more inclusive and really unlocking the potential of transit. We lose quite a number of seats, as you may be aware, because with Fiji Airways, the transit customers that go through just Fiji pass through Fiji because they go on to US or whatever or to other markets is quite big. So how do we harness the transit visitors and get them to stay in Fiji a bit longer? And of course, if we're talking about the future, one of the things we do have to be ready with is digitization, ensure easing of e-commerce because tourists come to Fiji now and, really people don't really carry cash. And so I know that, it's not only tourism, it's other small businesses as well, in terms of trying to get more business done through e-commerce platform. And that's, digitization is a big part of the Fiji government's agenda as well. So moving towards that and making it cheap as well, because what the MSMEs are saying is it's quite expensive to do e-commerce. And also I would say, spreading tourism out into the rural areas, getting more regional tourism representation, like in Vanua level, and also the outer areas as well. So the promotion, the marketing and promotion is really important. And I think with Tourism Fiji, what was said at the convention by the new CEO was they will refocus a lot on their core role, which is really marketing and tourism.
Yeah, well, it's a hugely complex system, isn't it, Jenny? I guess the other point to acknowledge is that there have been some big changes in some of the key personnel. You've mentioned Dr. Pant, who's taken over from Brent Hill as the new CEO of Tourism Fiji. Fiji Airways has a new CEO in Paul Scurra, again, very experienced operator in the airline industry. But I guess just going back to the convention itself, and from your perspective as the chair, how do you feel it achieved those objectives? Are there any sort of key outcomes or next steps that you'd like to highlight? Or
so the ministry, we had a list of takeaways from the convention. Some of those I've mentioned. More the regional tourism infrastructure and so forth. And these are things that the ministry will work towards in terms of achieving, because we do have to report back to the convention in the following year what actions were done to actually achieve. But was largely, I think, more on inclusiveness, being inclusive, spreading the benefits of tourism throughout the regions, and the importance of infrastructure as well. And the people, of course, we talk about, we had a bit of discussion. We look about workforce sustainability. You talked about Cook Islands, right? The Fijians being in Cooks, and that was actually brought up. Someone brought that up. Like, why are Fijians going to the Cook Islands? So I think, workforce sustainability is really important. And again, not only for tourism, it's for all the sectors in Fiji as well. I guess the question is, how do we make tourism careers more attractive in the long term? I know that when something that my late husband Dixon always had a passion about was trying to develop the locals into more high-level positions in the industry. Some of them.
You've got a great example as well, and Deputy Prime Minister Ngavoka, who has himself been a leader in the in the industry too.
Yes, exactly. If we can get, I would say, our senior management at least up, to at the top level of the industry, that would be really good. Yeah.
I guess another question, just thinking about the year ahead, are there any sort of particular initiatives or events or trends that we should be looking out for in Fiji?
We did talk about experiential tourism, the experience in other areas, culture, food, wellness, sports. Sports is a big one. If we can, get more of the sports one going, but of course we need a stadium as well, and events. We have UB40 this week. I think tonight.
Are you going?
No, I'm not going. Unfortunately, I have too much on in Suva. And looking at, I would say, for the future, more private-public partnerships in tourism infrastructure to get that going. We talk a lot about private-public partnerships as well in Fiji, but how do we go about doing it? We rely a lot on, thank you to New Zealand and Australian governments as well. They've been terrific in helping us set the tone for the various infrastructure. Digitization, and I think transport. If we can get, I would say, transport in airlines as well. Looking at if we could get something for the Pacific going, a link. We do have Fiji Airways, right, flying to the Pacific Islands, but there's no really, when you look at Pacific tourism, and I've often said that to the SPTO, like, you don't hear much about tours, people coming, like island hopping.
Right.
Have you heard much about that?
It's a growing strategy, I think, for providers such as Rarotonga airways, they've been working a lot with the French Polynesians. So as you attract particularly North American tourists who tend to come for longer periods, so the traditional Australian stay or New Zealand stay is about a week long, whereas Americans who paradoxically get a lot less annual leave but take longer holidays because it's more significant for them when they do. They might travel to Tahiti, but then fly on to Rarotonga, to Aitutaki, to experience the Cook Islands. And I think that's an interesting model if you think about Fiji's role as a hub on the other side, the middle of the Pacific, and being a sort of a gateway to others as well.
Yeah, no, exactly. Fiji, I think, could do a lot more with its advantage of being the hub. So it'd be great if we could go from Fiji to Tonga, which is, so short, about an hour from Tonga to another island, but we don't have that connectivity. But even locally as well, COVID was a great time for us locals. Remember we had that campaign, Love Your Locals? And to people, I even went to Rotuma doing that.
Oh, you went up there? Fantastic.
That was fantastic. I would not have gone otherwise. I've been wanting to go to Rotuma for a while. And last year I went to Taveuni. Luckily, I recalled at the last minute, I knew friends and I had people in Taveuni. But when we went to Taveuni, and I was saying to the tourism people in Taveuni, it was not easy to get information about Taveuni. You knew there were sites that said, okay, you go here, you go there. But to put the whole trip together, I mean, we had a few fantastic days. I had friends come in from Australia and we went to Taveuni. They were fantastic, and we need to do more of that.
I guess a couple of other things just to mention, for those who might be listening, later this year is the biennial the HOTEC trade show, which the Fiji Hotel and Tourism Association will be organising in October. I think that's set down for 22nd, 23rd October. There's obviously the Fiji Tourism Exchange, FTE, I think coming up in March, and they tend to bookend that with the SPTO, South Pacific Tourism Exchange as well. So bringing in all of the Expedias and the like to, understand what the opportunities are to bring more people to the region. But Jenny, I guess my final question would be for you, thinking about the business community outside of Fiji, what advice would you have, or your main message be for them?
Yeah, it's, connecting with the diaspora is so important. At Investment Fiji, the missions I was involved with, both to Australia and New Zealand, we really reconnected with the diaspora. And even if you look beyond Canada and US, where we also went, huge diaspora. So we always welcome them back, and some of them have come back, but I think we'd like a lot more. But to say that really Fiji is open for partnerships, we want to create long-term value with them, not just short-term returns. So there's real opportunities in business ventures, whether it's in accommodation, in experiences, even technology. If you look at technology, I mean, I just met someone I worked at who worked with me at PwC many years ago. He went to New Zealand. We sent him to New Zealand on training. And then he stayed on in New Zealand, which was quite common. He stayed on in New Zealand, but guess what? He's come back. I happened to pop into Investment Fiji yesterday, and he was here. He's setting up business in Fiji, but also staying in New Zealand, and he's already developed contacts around the region. So technology, look, even things like supply chains, managing logistics. And we talk a lot about green infrastructure, renewable. So I think EFL is now a lot more open to, or a lot more committed, I would say, to renewables. So, my message to the business community, Australia, New Zealand, is coming back to Fiji, creating partnerships with us already in Fiji, and investing in the local skills and communities. You do all of that, and I'm sure your balance sheet would look really good. Yeah, because it's really all about working together, right?
I think that's a great message to leave with people, Jenny. I think that reflects a lot of what I read about the outcomes from the convention as well, and so I think that message of working together is a critical one.
And so once again, Wakanui Nui Vinaka, it's been fantastic to have you on the podcast today. I know this is going to be of interest to a lot of people. And I really hoping that it is not the last time that we get to have a Talanoa with yourself on this show. So thank you once again, Jenny.
Thank you. No, but I must say thank you both to you, David and Glenn. Through your work in Fiji over the years, connecting, between the connections between Fiji and New Zealand, you've done a lot. You really have set the groundwork and continued the good work. And from where I can see now, even with your podcast, it's going to continue. So, Vinaka Vakalevu, you both have played a great part in developing businesses in Fiji as well. So thank you both so much.
Very kind, and thank you very much for those words, and thank you for being with us today. So Dave, wasn't that fantastic? And hasn't Jenny just had such a remarkable career? And the fact that she's still really continuing to give to Pacific business through things like chairing the Tourism Summit, I think just speaks a load to her stamina and her caring for the business community in the Pacific. So love talking to her. And Dave, that's two Palangi and a PC Nisi pod for another week. So if you wouldn't mind, final comments from you about that Talanoa, and then if you'd close us out, Dave.
Very happy to, Glenn. I couldn't agree more. Jenny, what an incredible human being and what an amazing leader. What she was saying about involving E08, indigenous Fijians in the resource development process. They've the land piece is really important, and there's an incredible rental income through the lease payments. But I think that ability to properly involve the culture of Fiji, the indigenous culture of Fiji in particular, into the tourism experience is so important. And you're starting to see that from Tourism Fiji now. And then I think the second part of it, around digitization, that's obviously where the world's going just about everywhere. So, fantastic to have that opportunity to have someone like Jenny on the show. Really appreciated her insights. Our show must end for this week. And so I think the last thing we should probably let the listeners know is that we're now on another channel, Glenn.
Indeed, we are on YouTube in full living colour.
So you can go into the YouTube app and search for Tu Palangi in a Pisinesi pod, and you'll start seeing some of our more recent episodes with some of the incredible people that we've interviewed. Jenny, well, you won't actually see Jenny because she wasn't able to get the camera working, but you'll be able to hear her. So if you want to check us out on YouTube, we're on that as well. But in the meantime, this has been Tu Palangi in a Pisinesi pod for the week ending January 30, 2026.